March 17, 1943. Berlin lay under a low, colorless sky, the kind that pressed down on the city like a lid on a coffin. Inside Abwehr headquarters, the air was heavy with smoke and fear. When the folder slammed onto the polished mahogany desk, the sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. Admiral Wilhelm Canaris's porcelain coffee cup jumped, dark liquid spilling across intelligence reports so sensitive that possession alone could lead to a firing squad if the Gestapo ever discovered them. For a long moment, no one spoke. The ticking of a clock seemed unbearably loud. Canaris did not curse. He did not shout. He simply stared at the pages in his hands, his fingers shaking in a way that betrayed what years of discipline usually concealed. Through the tall windows behind him, he could see the gray ribbon of the Landwehr Canal. 24 years earlier, revolutionaries had dumped Rosa Luxemburg's body into those waters. The canal had swallowed many truths since then, truths that power did not wish to hear. Now, as chief of German military intelligence, Canaris held a report that threatened not only Nazi propaganda but the entire intellectual foundation of the war itself. "Impossible," he murmured at last. "This has to be American deception. Propaganda fed to us through compromised agents." Yet the numbers did not change. No matter how often the report was checked, recalculated, cross-referenced, the conclusion remained the same. According to intercepted communications and human intelligence sources operating thousands of miles away in Mexico City, the Ford Motor Company's Willow Run plant in Michigan was producing one B-24 Liberator bomber every single hour. One finished heavy bomber, complete and ready for delivery, every 60 minutes. The B-24 was not a simple machine. It was among the most complex objects ever built by human hands. 1.5 million individual parts. Nearly 500,000 rivets. Roughly 30,000 separate components, all assembled into an 18-ton aircraft capable of crossing oceans and leveling cities. And yet this industrial monster was rolling off an American assembly line faster than Germany could produce a basic Kübelwagen military vehicle. Standing rigidly before the desk was Major Friedrich Wilhelm Heinz. He had personally verified the intelligence. He had checked it once, then again, then a third time, hoping desperately for an error that would let him discard the report. There was none. The figures were consistent across sources. The mathematics was merciless. What neither man fully understood in that moment was that they were witnessing the beginning of one of the most catastrophic intelligence failures in modern history. Not because German intelligence lacked information, not because agents failed in the field, but because the Nazi leadership was psychologically incapable of accepting a truth that shattered their ideology. The Third Reich would not be defeated only by soldiers and bombs. It would be defeated by arithmetic that its leaders refused to believe. The roots of this failure stretched back years. In 1941, as war clouds thickened, Luftwaffe General Karl Kohler had stood before Hermann Göring with reports from General Friedrich von Boeticher, Germany's military attaché in Washington. Boeticher's assessment was blunt. American aircraft production was rapidly accelerating and approaching 2,000 planes per month. Göring had laughed openly. Not a polite dismissal, but genuine amusement. Americans, Göring declared, were a nation of shopkeepers. They could stamp out refrigerators, automobiles, and razor blades, but warplanes required discipline, culture, and racial strength. Democracy made them weak. Their mixed population made them inefficient. Their Jews made them corrupt. Industrial miracles were impossible in a society so divided. 4 days after Pearl Harbor, Göring repeated the same smug certainty to Adolf Hitler at the Wolf's Lair. America's entry into the war, he said, changed nothing. The Americans were bluffing. They always exaggerated. They lacked the will, the unity, and the blood to sustain real war production. By early 1943, German intelligence networks scattered across the Americas were sending back reports that defied every word of that confidence. The reports came independently, from people who did not know one another and had no reason to coordinate their stories. Mexican industrialists sympathetic to Germany spoke of factories beyond imagination. Spanish diplomats attending embassy receptions heard numbers that sounded absurd. Swedish businessmen traveling through Detroit returned shaken. Intercepted letters from American workers to relatives in neutral countries spoke casually of production figures that would have been state secrets in Germany. All of them described the same impossible reality. Ford's Willow Run plant alone was producing more heavy bombers than the entire German aircraft industry. Oberst Nikolaus Ritter, head of air intelligence within the Abwehr, was among the few men capable of understanding what this meant. Ritter had lived in the United States for 10 years before the war. In the 1920s, he had watched the Manhattan skyline claw its way upward. From his apartment window, he had observed the Chrysler Building rise from foundation to completion in less than 2 years. He knew, better than most German officers, what American industry could do when unleashed. Ritter spent weeks immersed in the data. He checked shipping manifests, labor figures, aluminum consumption, power usage. Each calculation reinforced the same grim conclusion. When he finally reported to Canaris, his voice carried none of the excitement of discovery. It carried resignation. "If these figures are correct," Ritter said quietly, "then Germany has already lost the war. What remains is a matter of time and mathematics." The intelligence arrived through routes so dangerous that each carried its own risk of exposure. In Mexico City, George Nikolaus ran the Abwehr's primary network. He cultivated sources among American businessmen who traveled freely between Detroit and Mexico's oil fields. These men spoke openly over dinner, over drinks, unaware that German agents were memorizing every word. On February 3, 1943, American oil executive Harold Morrison attended a reception at the German-Mexican Chamber of Commerce. After several tequilas, his caution dissolved. He began describing his recent tour of Willow Run, arranged by Ford to impress potential investors and government officials. What he described sounded less like a factory and more like a continent. The assembly line stretched more than a mile. The building was so vast that clouds formed beneath its roof. Moisture condensed, and sometimes it actually rained inside the factory. 42,000 workers labored there, Morrison said, thousands of them women, many of them black Americans, all building the most complex flying machine ever devised. He pulled out a pencil and sketched on a napkin. 2 bomb bays, 4,000 pounds of ordnance each. 4 engines producing 1,200 horsepower apiece. Sub-assemblies flowing together like rivers toward the sea. Wing sections arriving from one direction, fuselages from another, tail assemblies from a third, all meeting at precisely timed points along the line. A German agent posing as an Argentine leather merchant asked whether such complexity caused breakdowns and delays. Morrison laughed. That was what Consolidated Aircraft had believed. They mocked Ford and said airplanes could not be built like cars. But Ford had broken the bomber down into tens of thousands of simple tasks. Each worker repeated the same motion over and over. Training took days, not months. A woman who had been making breakfast for her children a week earlier was now installing hydraulic lines in a bomber's tail. More intelligence flowed through Spain. Colonel José Ungria, Spain's military attaché in Washington, cultivated close relationships with American manufacturers while quietly passing information to Germany. At a reception, he met Charles Sorensen, Ford's production chief and the man who had designed Willow Run. Sorensen spoke with pride. He described how, after visiting Consolidated's San Diego plant in 1940 and seeing bombers built outdoors like custom projects, he knew there had to be a better way. That night, Alone in his hotel room, he sketched an entire production flow. Bombers would move past stationary workers. Repetition would replace improvisation. Perfection would come from routine. Ungria asked about labor challenges. Sorensen answered without hesitation. Ford trained 8,000 workers a week. Women made up nearly 40% of the workforce. Black Americans operated advanced machinery. Teenagers managed logistics. Democracy, Sorensen said, meant using every capable hand. Swedish engineers confirmed the scale. One reported that the capital investment alone staggered the imagination. Japanese intelligence, intercepted by Germany, independently verified the numbers. This single American factory, a Japanese officer wrote, produced more aircraft than Japan's entire aviation industry. By April 1943, German intelligence had confirmation from 17 independent sources. The numbers were no longer questionable. They were overwhelming. Canaris authorized sabotage teams to be sent to the United States, partly to gather proof. One of those men surrendered almost immediately and confirmed the worst fears. Berlin did not believe. Proof was demanded not to guide strategy, but to overcome ideological blindness. When Canaris presented the intelligence to Göring, the Reichsmarschall rejected it with contempt. Wooden mock-ups, he said. Propaganda. Lies designed to frighten Germany. Hitler reacted the same way. Bombers were not cars. Precision could not be mass-produced. 6 years of German preparation could not be matched in 16 months. It was impossible. Even film footage showing the mile-long assembly line was burned rather than shown, because truth had become more dangerous than ignorance. By 1944, reality arrived in the sky. Thousands of American bombers darkened German airspace. Big Week crushed aircraft production. On D-Day, Allied planes filled the horizon while the Luftwaffe could barely respond. Willow Run reached peak production, delivering a finished bomber every 63 minutes. Women, Black Americans, disabled workers, groups Nazi ideology dismissed as inferior, had outproduced the so-called master race by orders of magnitude. After the war, German intelligence officers admitted the truth. They had known. They had reported it. But to insist was to die. In the ruins of Berlin, a final report was found. Willow Run production confirmed. We reported this truth 2 years ago. We were not believed. Germany dies not from lack of intelligence, but from lack of wisdom. Willow Run built more than bombers. It built proof. Proof that democracy could mobilize human potential beyond the reach of tyranny. German spies counted every aircraft. German leaders believed none of it. And that disbelief destroyed the Third Reich as surely as any bomb ever dropped.